Okay, so with our title and action safe layer, there's one thing we need to do before we can continue on with this moving background portion, and that is to assign this as a guide layer, meaning that whenever we export this layer, we don't see these guides here. We only see them when we're actually working on this animation. So I'm going to right click on the title action layer, and over here on this option, it's called guide. Click guide. The icon for this layer has changed now to what looks like to be a T ruler, and I'm going to lock it. And I'm going to make sure that this layer remains always on the top. Okay, and I'm going to save it. Just keep that in mind. Your action and title safe will always be on top. So the next thing we need to do is import our background elements. So I'm going to go to File, Import, Import to Library, and go to the GShare. And find instructors. My name, Flash, course references, background, Sally backgrounds, and here we will find 3 PSD documents. I'm going to select all 3 of them and click Open. The Import to Library option will pop up, and it's going to say, hey man, these are Photoshop layers. Convert to Flash layers or keyframes. Flash layers. Okay, and it's going to ask me the same thing for each one. Okay. Okay, so if I go over to my library, once they are finished importing, I can see a huge mess here. And basically all I want really are these symbols here. And I don't necessarily want these layers here. They're just sort of taking up space. And I'm curious if I could delete this. No, I cannot. I have to keep them. Alright, so I have to keep all this stuff together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder and call it background. Make sure that whenever you create this folder, it's not embedded in this other folder like this one happens to be. To make sure you can pull it out, just move it down and to the right, and it should be placed up top because it starts with a B and is its own thing. And now I'm going to take all the background stuff that we just imported and drag it into this folder, just so it's not so cluttered. And I'm going to do a little trick and put a space in front of our character folder. Click enter, and all that's going to do is give it a bit of hierarchy now, so our character remains on top, and then underneath it is our background. Okay, so we keep this nice and clean, and now I'm going to save it. And after I'm done saving it, I want to create a couple layers, just like we did when we created the many parts of Sally. We created the layers for them first. So I'm going to do that over here. I'm going to create 3 new layers, and I'm going to title them the same as what we have here in our background. So we can see that there's the background PSD, meaning this is the back, the very bottom one. So I'll make sure and do that here and call it BG. Sorry, for background. And this layer has to be behind everything, so of course it's going to be under the Sally layer. And the next round is going to be the midground, and I'll label this one as mid, MID. And again, this one is also going to be behind Sally. And the next one is the foreground. And this one is actually in front of Sally. So your layers should look like this. First, title action, foreground, Sally, mid, and background. Now we're going to start bringing these elements onto the stage. So I'm going to select the background layer and then come over here to the background symbol. That's the one with the square, circle, and triangle shapes in that little icon, and I'm just going to drag that onto the stage. One thing you'll notice is that this thing is huge. So do you recall using the transform panel? Well, we're going to do the same thing, but this time we're just going to hover our cursor over one of the percentages, either width or height. It doesn't matter, because remember, our preference is constrained, meaning that whatever I change it to, the other one moves correspondingly. And I'm going to set my background. Now also remember that we have guides here, which are our action safe and our title safe, so we know that if we want the top of the Eiffel Tower to show up in this shot, it has to be within our action safe. And so I'm gonna actually decrease the size just a little bit more so we can fit it in there. Some good placement. And we're going to lock this background layer. Don't worry about this yet. We'll see what happens when we bring in the midground. We might actually have to do a little bit of adjusting, but until we get everything in here, we don't know for sure. So don't be confused by the order of what these say. We definitely want to pull in the MD ground PSD into the midground. So again, this one will probably be even bigger, and this is called the midground layer, and it's behind Sally. Going back to our transform, going to scrub along there. Now this one's a little bit different than the background in that we're going to bring it all the way down to the bottom of the action safe, and we can adjust the position of Sally a little bit later. I'm going to zoom out so you can get a better idea of what's going to happen here. This layer here is actually going to be twice as big, because it's going to be appearing as if Sally's going to be taking a stroll through town. And while the background doesn't change, this midground is actually going to constantly be moving. So I'm going to actually have to double this. And the best way to do that is, while it's selected, I'm going to hit Command, either with the Mac, Command D or Control D for the PSD, and duplicate it. And you can see that it just made two. And then I'm going to do my best to line these up. And I might actually have to adjust the size of this one. So going over to my free transform tool, I'm going to take that pivot that I just made and adjust it to it fits. Maybe I have to bring it down a little bit. And these backgrounds are complement Billy Rose. So if you know Billy Rose, tell him thanks for creating such awesome backgrounds for this video. Next step, before we're done, is go back to our selection tool and click both of these symbols, and we'll go to modify and group, meaning that now Flash will recognize this image as just one big image, and we will go ahead and put it back to where it was, something like this. And now I'm noticing that this gap here for the background of Paris, I'm going to have to adjust that. So I'm going to lock the midground, unlock the background, select it, and now we're going to have to make it actually a little bit bigger. So go back over to our transform. That should be big enough, I would hope. Bring it low enough so we can see the Eiffel Tower. And I'll lock the midground again. And holding down Shift, I'm going to slide it around and see if I don't notice any blaring gaps like there. Even though that's an action save, let's be extra safe and make it even bigger. And lower so we can see it. And then, okay. Oh. And actually, I'm going to adjust this one a little bit. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so it extends all the way down to the bottom of our stage. And I know I just told you that action safe is where we want it, but it's better to be safe than sorry, I would imagine. Okay. I'm going to lock this layer and lock the background layer and save it. And next we're bringing on the foreground elements. So the same as before, with the foreground layer selected, I'm bringing in the foreground elements. And again, these ones will be pretty big, not quite as big as the other ones are, and we want them to actually be a little bit bigger than the houses in front or in the back, simply to give that implication of size, of space. And I'll start it with something like so. A little bit lower too. And you'll notice that this one is long enough. Okay, and now I will lock this layer and save it. We're not done yet though. Now that we have all our elements on, we're going to have to animate it. So in the next portion, we'll be going over the timing and spacing of these three layers.